In this lesson, we'll look at the research of John Jost and his colleagues. And he and his colleagues have proposed what they call system justification theory to help understand certain social phenomena and psychological phenomena. System justification attempts to give an answer to this type of question. Why have low status groups so often been tranquil in the face of injustice? Now, if we take a look at our income inequality here, this is our sort of the income parade, you might say. Of course, here are poorer folks down here, wealthier folks over here. Jost is interested in understanding why it is that throughout history, inequality has not produced more sort of social rebellion, you might say. Now, of course, one obvious answer would be, well, you might get in trouble, right? If you start rebelling in societies of the past, you might be imprisoned or killed even, right? But Jost and his colleagues were interested in whether there might be psychological explanations for why people at the lower end of the status hierarchy might be relatively passive or tranquil in the face of obvious injustices to them, that is. Right? Of course, not only could this be economic inequality, it could be some kind of racial status hierarchy as well. And in fact, the system justification theory itself originally grew out of work with the implicit association test. In particular, the race tests, where the subjects are asked to categorize words as either good or bad and faces as either black or white, and then the computer measures the response times. You'll recall that most whites have an in-group automatic preference. So most whites are faster at categorizing white faces and good words than categorizing white faces and bad words. But interestingly, almost half of blacks also have a white automatic preference, right? Which means that as a group, for African Americans, there's no overall in-group preferences like there is for whites. So many blacks have a black preference, automatic preference, but many blacks have an automatic white preference, no overall in-group preference. And so that got Jost and his colleagues wondering about the psychologies of people who are not in dominant positions in society, the lower status groups. But that could be racial status, but also economic status as well. Now, Jost hypothesizes that humans are motivated to think of the social system as legitimate. And this is what system justification theory entails. So people are motivated to see the social system as legitimate. And why would they do that? For various psychological reasons. For example, reducing uncertainty, anxiety, and threat. Now, if you think about that, what it would be like to be at the lower end of the social status hierarchy here, right? The idea here would be is you might be motivated to see this system as legitimate, because if you saw this system as illegitimate, then that's a kind of a fearful situation, right? If you recognize the system, the social system, as unfair, that is stressful. If you recognize this system as one in which you might at any time be harmed by the dominant members of the society, that can produce anxiety, right? And so Jost is arguing that there may be, and further research will have to demonstrate this, but there may be some psychological motivation to see the social system as legitimate, right? Which would mean that, yes, you're on the low end of the scale, but the system as a whole is fair and legitimate, and that would mean that you're not going to be just sort of, oppressed arbitrarily or randomly or something, and no harm is going to come to you out of the blue. That seeing the system as legitimate and fair might have some psychological benefits. And that's what he means by this idea of the need to reduce uncertainty, anxiety, and threat. Now, Jost argues that system justification tendencies serve a palliative function, right? Reducing distress, promoting positive emotion toward and general satisfaction with life. It also operates as a coping mechanism for dealing with threats to the system. Now, as an example of this type of approach, we can take a look at the economy, research on people's attitudes and beliefs about the economy. And this is research published in an article called Fair Market Ideology. Here's the paradox, as Jost sets it out. With an increasing wealth gap in America, there is still strong legitimacy for the market system. So again, we see the nature of the puzzle. The market system has been part of this growing inequality in America, yet there's still a lot of feelings of legitimacy for market systems. And that's the paradox. In fact, if you ask people, here is the percent believing that the U.S. economic system is basically fair versus basically unfair, right? And this is as a function of the classification, so the have-nots and the haves. So let's take a look at the haves. Basically unfair, only 24% of the haves would say that. 74% of the haves would say it's basically fair. But look at the have-nots. So again, these would be folks who, relative to the haves, are lower down on the socioeconomic status scale. 48% say it's unfair, but 51% say it's basically fair, right? So that is a big chunk of people in the have-nots who are saying that the system is basically fair. And for Jost and his colleagues, that's somewhat of a puzzle, right? You might think that the unfair bar would be a little higher for the have-nots. Here's another example. Here's a question. The percent agreeing that large differences in income are legitimate and necessary, right? Now, here are two possible reasons for the legitimacy or necessity. To get people to work hard, that would be the light-colored bars, and the dark one, an incentive for individual effort, right? So we've talked about inequality as an incentive. Now, on the x-axis, look at what we got here. Income level, greater than $25,000, but look, as we go down the income level, down to people who are making less than $5,000, right, a year income, we see, to get people to work hard, we see as you go down, more and more people will endorse inequality and or justify inequality as saying that it's necessary to get people to work hard. Similarly, with the incentive for individual effort. In other words, what Jost is finding here is that poor people, relatively poor people, are endorsing large differences in income as legitimate and necessary, right? So again, it's this type of survey data that is puzzling to Jost, and he and his colleagues wanted to try to understand. And system justification theory would be one way to understand that people are motivated, even when they're on the low end of the social scale, people are motivated to see the system as legitimate. Now, why would people low on the social scale endorse the system? Now, traditionally, there have been other explanations for that type of thing. One branch of research is called belief in a just world. So this is just world theory. And just world theory can be summarized in the following way, that people get what they deserve and deserve what they get. So if you believe that statement right there, then that kind of captures this idea of just world theory, that people may be sort of motivated to see the world as fair in this way, that the people get what they deserve and deserve what they get. And so in the context of the economic system, then that would lead to people blaming the poor for failures and crediting the rich for their success, for their status. Right? So if you're poor, right, well, people get what they deserve, then you must somehow deserve that poverty, right? And then you deserve what you get. So if you're rich, you must have deserved it, right? So this is called just world theory. Now that theory predates John Jost's research on system justification, and we'll see that it's a little bit different. There's a difference between the two, but we'll come to that a little later. Another possibility for why people low on the economic or social scale might endorse the system is that the free market gives opportunity to control one's own fate, and so it's liked by people, right? So the market allows people to pursue their own interests and to make choices and so on, and that just is a system that people do like, even if they don't have the resources to empower their own choices. Another idea is that optimism about the future can lead to support for the market, right? So people in the low end of the scale might think, well, someday they're gonna march up the social economic ladder, right? So optimism. So say, yeah, well, I'll accept this system because I'm on my way up, that type of thing. And as we'll see, Dan Ariely and others have done research suggesting that ignorance may be another reason why people endorse the system, because they may not actually know the state of inequality, right? So ignorance of the actual state of inequality might also be a factor. If you don't know how unequal the system is, then you might not oppose it as much, right? So if you think the system is more equal than it really is, you'll endorse the system more than you otherwise would. Now, how does Jost measure these ideas, the system justification attitude? And again, like many social psychologists, they have composed a scale. So here's the economic system justification scale, and it has items like the following. If people work hard, they almost always get what they want. The existence of widespread economic differences does not mean that they are inevitable. That's reverse scored. It is virtually impossible to eliminate poverty. Equal distribution of resources is a possibility for our society. Poor people are not essentially different from rich people. Economic positions are legitimate reflections of people's achievements, etc. So you can see then with these types of survey statements here that your view of the economic system will be captured by your responses to these statements. And so this is called the economic system justification scale. Now they found some interesting results. For advantaged groups, whites and higher income folks, high scores on the economic system justification scale is correlated to increased self-esteem, using other measures of self-esteem and in-group favoritism, right? Preference for whites. So for advantaged groups, right, they see the system as, fair. They're the advantaged groups. And so again, the idea would be that's not such a surprise. For disadvantaged groups, interestingly, for example, blacks and poor folk, high economic system justification is correlated to decreased self-esteem and out-group favoritism, right? So for blacks, that would be a preference for whites. For poor people, that would be a preference for rich, etc. And so Jost takes away from this that the people can engage in system justification even when there is a cost to the self, even when it's related to something negative about the self, low self-esteem, for example, or out-group favoritism. And this is one of the reasons why he thinks it's a genuine psychological phenomenon, that people are endorsing the system. They see the system as legitimate, even when they themselves are low in the status, are identifying with the out-group, with people higher up in the status, and are having lower self-esteem, right? Now, in the next part, we'll take a look at some actual studies on system justification theory.